the waste that will be produced will be transported to and marketed outside of the area of excess nutrients. So we read that as saying that the product that's going to be produced will be sold to a market outside the general area and off-site. The next is our Exhibit B, which also describes the project. This is an executive summary that was provided to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, I believe for a grant project. And it mentions that the company's plans are to produce biochar and a wide range of other feedstocks and process items other than poultry litter, and also market and transport those products from the site for processing. The other important item that I'd like to draw your attention to is give me one second. The Maryland Department of Environment, this would be our Exhibit I, identifying the project as a plant, not a storage building, and it also identifies activities such as processing and the use for the primary use for the building for things that are outside the definition of what would be allowed as a principal use. Our Exhibit L is a map that shows the proximity of all the interested parties to the site. Our Exhibit M is a study demonstrating the likelihood of property value decline as a result of the siting of the biorefinery there. Exhibit Q, which shows environmental justice screening analysis results that shows that this area is quite possibly an environmental justice area, and there are state and federal and perhaps local laws that require more public notice and more public notification about the proposal and more public involvement. And our Exhibit S is a best practice study that demonstrates the need for additional litter to have to be trucked in order to have the biorefinery operate and function. And as I mentioned before, other feedstocks. So based on these documents, it's our impression that it won't just be poultry litter that will need to be processed at the biorefinery, and definitely more poultry litter than what will be produced on the site if, in fact, there is a poultry facility on the site.
True. Yes, sir.
Again, so just for the record, I'd like to note and preserve my objection that if that's just legal argument and it's not facts or testimony or anything you're going to consider in making your decision other than argument, I guess it sounded a lot like testimony to me by someone who was not sworn and is not a witness.
Noted.
With respect to admission of these exhibits, I'll note the index provided. Exhibit N is not in the packet that I was provided, neighbor testimony.
That one got left out, sorry.
Exhibit,
That exhibit.
oh, okay. I'm sorry, it's not labeled, so I guess that's
There is, I think the original photos were submitted to the Board of Appeals.
There's no testimony, it's just a series of aerial photos. Exhibit M, which was characterized as a study demonstrating property value decline. Exhibit M is a one-page abstract of a report from 2015 the title is Evidence from 1,600 Toxic Plant Openings. The report isn't included. There's nothing that indicates it has anything to do with the technology that's proposed here, and the report's not even included. It's just a one-page abstract. So I would object to your admission or consideration of that in any context. Exhibit S is characterized as a best practice study demonstrating the need for additional litter to be trucked in. Exhibit S in the packet I received is a copy out of the county zoning ordinance with principal use and accessory use highlighted. I'm not sure what the study is or who performed it, but there's no basis.
What exhibit is that?
S is in Sam. And I don't have a copy of Exhibit T either, which is characterized as neighbor photos of trash.
That's what you just, is that what she just showed you? I
No,
don't
she
know.
just showed me N as in Nancy.
Okay.
So reserve those objections for the record. Appreciate you.
So noted.
So, Mr. Chair, I know you have not had the chance to review them. Do you want to reserve on admitting them at this time, to have the opportunity to look through them and to consider Mr. Showalter's objections? Or do you want to receive them all and give them whatever weight the board determines?
Yes.
So one or two?
Just a matter of, we can reserve.
Okay. Then we'll find a time for the board to review these,
Yes.
and we'll go from there.
Okay.
I believe that concludes the interested parties presentation. So pursuant to the code at this point, the county needs to satisfy its burden. If the board finds the county satisfies its burden, then it shifts to the appellant to present their case. If Mr. Showalter is making that motion, if he's not, then he can begin his case.
I didn't want to cut you off, but so I'd like to move for judgment, Mr. Chairman, on the basis that the county has failed to meet its burden that the use that's proposed is prohibited on this site. And the basis for that is, it's clear from the records that the only poultry litter that's to be processed by this technology is litter that's produced on this property. There's no poultry litter being imported to this property for this activity, and the county acknowledged that in their determination. The county confirmed that the definition, that the use, the production of poultry is permitted by right. It's not an accessory use, it's permitted by right, which is what we believe is the correct interpretation. And it falls under agricultural operations under the table of uses. The definition of agricultural operations, as established by the interpretation provisions of the county code, I think includes the definition of agriculture in the zoning ordinance, but more specifically and particularly includes the definition of agricultural operations, which is set forth in the county's right to farm ordinance. That definition is broader than the definition of agriculture in the zoning ordinance. And that definition includes handling of manure, composting, raising of poultry, and any commercial agricultural procedure performed as incident to or in conjunction with such operations. But more to the point, the county testimony is clear that the definition of poultry house exists solely for purposes of establishing a development standard. Poultry house is not a different or unique use. Poultry houses and everything that poultry houses encompass are permitted by right as an agricultural operation in the A1 district. The definition of poultry house is any structure, including all related buildings and appurtenances, designed and used for the growing of poultry. This includes, but is not limited to, fans, feed bins, litter storage, manure sheds, incinerators, composters, and cold storage. The county testimony confirmed that incineration is a thermal process to burn biomass, and that the biomass that could be burned in a poultry operation is either going to be poultry or waste. The county testimony confirmed that composting is a chemical process to break down biomass, either poultry or poultry litter, poultry waste. So the county code not only permits agricultural activity with a very, very broad definition, including procedures performed incident to it, it specifically defines poultry houses for purposes of establishing standards, and it goes on to say that poultry houses, which are permitted by right, include but are not limited to litter storage, manure sheds, incinerators, and composters. What's proposed here is different than what you've heard about in the testimony from the neighbors. We understand that there may be questions. We understand we probably could have done a better job answering questions about the use. But what's proposed here is a technology for processing poultry litter on a poultry producing property. What's not proposed here is an industrial refinery. What's not proposed here is the processing of poultry litter from anywhere else. And you'll hear more in our testimony, but what's happening in this case is poultry litter is coming out of those houses. It's going into a manure shed. It's going to come out of that manure shed and be dried. It will be run through this process, which uses heat to convert that poultry litter into two products, biochar and biofuel. The biofuel is not going to be produced at a volume to be sold here. This is a small project to demonstrate its function and to process just on-site waste. The biofuel is going to go back into this system and be burned to produce heat for the process. The only thing that comes out of this is biochar, which is roughly, if you burn or process, it's not fully burned, but if you process 3 tons of poultry litter, you end up with about 1.2 tons of biochar. It's a soil amendment. The county testified that poultry farmers apply their manure to their fields or sell it or transport it to other people. So the county can't say that the transport of biochar, a soil amendment from poultry operations, is prohibited. If the county takes the position you can't send anything off of a poultry farm, every poultry farmer in this county is going to have a problem. That's not what the county's saying. If the county says you can't apply a chemical or thermal process to process your litter, I guess they can argue that's the case, but that's directly inconsistent with the code, which specifically permits incinerators and composters, which can only be applied to dead chickens or poultry litter. What we're doing, you'll hear more from us in detail, but what we're doing is better environmentally and cleaner than incineration or composting. So the use that's proposed, as it's limited on this site, and again, that's processing only poultry litter generated on this parcel, is a use that's permitted by right. We have no argument with the county that if this demonstration proves to be successful, the technology is validated, the technology, the outputs, if you will, the biochar, the nutrient concentrations of biochar, all of that stuff will come out of this demonstration of this technology. It may very well lead to a biorefinery which takes waste from others in a production process to process waste from elsewhere to produce a marketable fuel. That's not what's proposed on this property. That's not what's proposed at this scale. What confused this issue is a question of use versus technology. And so if a farmer uses a GPS-guided sprayer, they're still spraying their fields. They may be using new technology to do it, but they're applying herbicide, fertilizer, pesticide to it. If a farmer uses a new, multispectral drone to fly their field and look at crop stress, they may be doing the same thing they did on foot years ago. They're using new technology, but they're still inspecting their growing crop. If a farmer uses state-of-the-art technology to reduce the volume of waste, poultry waste produced on site, and they do so in a manner that is either chemical, composting, or thermal, or in between, applying heat, a thermochemical operation is what we're doing to reduce the volume of poultry litter. We still have the right to do that on our property, just like Farmer Joe has the right to compost his litter, or somebody else could incinerate theirs. We still have the right to remove biochar, whether it goes to the University of Maryland for testing procedures, or whether it's sold to a farmer as a soil amendment, just like every other farmer has the right to sell or use their poultry litter. And so this is a question of use. That's it. I acknowledge there are discussions about building codes, building permits, inspection. There may very well be, code issues that require modifications to the building. That's not before you today. The only question before you today is the process of poultry waste produced on this site permitted by right, either by right as an agricultural operation, by right as a subset of that as a poultry house, or incidental to the poultry operation. This is just an ag operation that is processing its litter. And so whether you call it a permitted use, which is what I think the right answer is, or find it's incidental to that, every poultry operation in this county, incidental to its operation or as part of its permitted operation, handles its manure. Some compost it, some just store it and apply it as cake, some could burn it. And they can do all of that by right, just like this property owner can. So I respectfully submit that in this case, the county made an error and that this activity is permitted by right. And I think I did at the start of that, but I would just move that the board find that the county did not meet its burden and reverse the county's decision.
Are you finished with your presentation?
I'm finished with my motion.
Okay.
After you rule on that, if you rule against it, then we will have a presentation.
Okay. All right. So there's I'm going to call it contradiction, it may not be, because Mr. Showalter's illustrated in several sections of the code where it is, in his mind, something that can be been utilized or used, whereas Mr. Meadows has listed his logic and his reasons in the county code as to why it is not appropriate. So our question is whether or not we take one section of the code and says, well, that allows this facility to operate in this manner, or we take another section of the code where it's not listed as permissible. And Mr. Showalter is going to obviously say that where he's got what a poultry house is, allows for combustible incinerators and so forth. One question I have is, what is the definition of incinerator? I know that farmers burn their chickens when they're dead, and they go through and they pick them up. They may bury them as well. People here don't want them buried in this area because they don't worry about the paleo channel, so to speak. So anyway, those are my initial comments as to his motion for us overturning the zoning administrator's denial of the permit. You look at me hard, Mr. Morris.
Oh, I'm trying to understand.
Anybody want to start? Mr. Ennis?
You know me, I like starting. Right now, my opinion is that this is an industrial, intense industrial use. And I don't see it as being or incidental to the main use, poultry farming. And even your example of incinerator, all of us who grew up here and are familiar with chickens, we know what that, we know what that means, and it's what you just described. This is an industrial use, to me, that just happens to be using poultry manure. That's how I view it. The definition accessory use was pointed out as customarily, and I can't see anything customary about this. And it may be a great technology, but I don't see it as, we've never seen it before, for example, so that indicates that. But I was just listening to Mr. Showalter talk about, and it seems the main thrust of this is a technological testing. This is a pilot plant. The main thrust of this is to prove out a technology. And frankly, I can just see a lot better places than this spot here. There seems to be some doubt as to whether the poultry operation is, or the poultry house is actually operational, or even could be operational. And taking that thought a step further is, if it is truly testing technology, that's a pretty big project. You got the University of Maryland, you got MDA, and all these folks that are supporting it with grants and whatever the case. So it would seem like to me that they would want to set up this in a location in our county, which is a lot more consistent with that activity. So I you can see where I'm headed. At this point in time, unless I hear differently, I would support the staff's decision.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Cathura, how many chickens do you raise a year
So at one turn
on this farm?
on this farm, at one turn, we will have about 35 to 37,000 chickens,
In one grow or
One grow.
one year?
one grow.
One grow. It-
That's what you can raise, or are raising, which is
That's what we were raising.
what you
till-
were raising.
Correct.
Is this process being, is this being done anywhere else to our knowledge on Delmarva? Or is this truly a pilot?
This is a pilot. We are the pioneers of this technology.
Michael?
I have a couple of things. Tell me how you're currently disposing of the litter.
Currently, we have, if you're familiar with litter, it's about 2 foot high into the houses. So they have not disposed of at this time for past 4 years.
How many?
The sellers that I purchased from had not done
Oh, okay. Did you
So-
say 4 or 40?
4.
4.
So it's about, all they did was added on a little bit. Just
And they were using 3, 4, 5 flocks a year?
about 8 or 9 flocks.
8 or 9?
So if this is not granted, how will you dispose of that 3 or 4 foot of litter?
So we will have to get a middleman that comes in, that will be taking all that out for us and literally taking it to either spread it and trucking it to Midwest or down south or somewhere else.
There was some testimony about truck traffic, increased truck traffic on that road. In your opinion, how much of that increased truck traffic is because of the way that you currently operate your farm?
Currently operate or with this process?
Well, the process is not in place.
Correct.
So the truck traffic that they're talking about is something that's happening right now.
No, he's not operating broiler industry right now.
Right, it's not. But they're saying that the truck traffic has increased on the road.
No, I think they said it would.
No, they said
Okay.
it is.
Well, if he's not operational, I don't understand how the truck traffic has increased.
So the seller that sold the property to me at this time is working for a poultry producer, and he has his poultry truck that comes in and goes out
And how frequent is that?
once a day. He goes out and picks up, does what he does with the chickens, and then at the end of night or end of day that he's back.
Okay, and I guess this is just for my information purposes, there's some testimony about the impact on health and also on property value. There was only one thing submitted that basically talked about impact on property value. That, to me, was a very broad statement. I haven't heard anything from that was a local broker's opinion or from an appraiser saying that because these things happen locally, that it impacts property value to a certain extent. The other thing was that there were some discussions about impact on health. Nothing that I heard said that that type of operation is going to aggravate existing health conditions. So that's my concern about it.
Happy to give a statement about property values from a real estate agent. I don't three properties and then really speak.
I think we're finished with this point in time.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure, I could be wrong, but I'm not sure that we're here. The decision in front of us is whether the decision was clearly not erroneous or arbitrary or capricious. Property values really doesn't come into play because it's not a special exception request. This is just about, is that a permitted use under the code?
Right.
And that's, the county has, and Mr. Meadows has taken a position, and it's being appealed in front of us, so that really doesn't affect our decision here. But I'm a little bit confused about what our step is right now. What are we being asked to do?
So Section 225, 158 outlines the burden of proof in appeals in matters of original jurisdiction. Subsection A states that the zoning administrator shall have the initial burden of presenting to the board sufficient evidence and argument to justify the order or decision appealed from. The burden of presenting evidence and argument to the contrary then shifts to the appellant, who shall also have the burden of persuasion. So the board needs to have a motion to find that the zoning administrator presented to the board sufficient evidence and argument to justify the order of decision appealed. If that's the motion, then Mr. Showalter and his client will present their case. If the motion and finding of the board is that the zoning administrator has not presented to the board sufficient evidence and argument to justify the order or decision appealed, then you've essentially reversed the decision at this point in time, and the hearing would conclude, because that's the standard set forth in the code.
Just as my opinion, I think we're kind of all sharing up here, that the county has met its burden. And in my opinion, Mr. Meadows has met his burden and of proof.
So if, as to where we're going, if we uphold the county administrators, not county administrator, where are you, Clark?
Administrator.
Zoning administrator. Then that would require approval to uphold it. Then we're talking about Mr. Showalter making a presentation. Do we have not interested parties, but parties of interest have any opportunity before we make a decision?
After Mr. Showalter makes his presentation, then the public comment period would begin.
Okay, so it's after.
Correct.
Okay. So what else are we missing before we reach a consensus on upholding Mr. Meadows' decision or
To the
denying
extent,
it?
to the extent that you may want to review any of the exhibits that you have not seen already, you could review those. If you find that at this stage you don't need to review the exhibits, and you still don't need to make any decision on the exhibits yet. I have categorized almost all of them. I'm going to ask Ms. Diamond to come assist me with a few that appear to be missing. But if you feel confident that if Mr. Turner expressed that he would make that motion, he can make the motion to find that the board, that the zoning administrator has met his initial burden. And if that's seconded and adopted, then we'd proceed to the next phase of the hearing.
So since I have not accepted those as an exhibit, that's going to take some time for us to evaluate. So if we decide we want to do that and we feel it's important that if we're going to accept them as an exhibit, that we review them before we make a decision. Do you disagree with that?
This is a lesser, you can, if you feel based on, without any additional evidence, just based purely on testimony of the staff report, you can, and the evidence that you heard orally, then you don't need to review any additional exhibits.
Okay.
But I'm not trying to dissuade you or persuade you
Right.
on which course of action to take. I have them categorized.
From that explanation, I think that we would not admit them as exhibits if we're going to uphold Mr. Mehta's decision at this point in time. Then I don't know what you are. If
Interested parties.
interested parties at the later wanted to submit those exhibits, they could do that after Mr. Showalter's presentation.
The board has reserved on ruling whether to admit them or not. That reservation would continue all the way through the close of the hearing. So it's at any point, ideally before we get to closing statements, maybe we could recess. You could review them at that time, make a determination which you're going to receive and which you're not going to receive, or if you're going to receive all of them.
So basically, board, if we're willing to make a decision as to upholding or not upholding Mr. Mehta's decision without using the exhibits that the interested parties presented, then we can proceed. You straight, Jim?
And I think the term is he's met his initial burden of proof supporting his decision. So that would be a motion that I would be willing to make when you're ready for that. Without
ready.
any additional.
I'm ready.
You ready?
Well, yeah, Mr. Chairman, may I?
Point
can I-
of clarification?
Yeah, well, I'd like to do a follow-up question for Mr. Katua. Is that okay?
Sure.
And this follow-up with Mr. Hoy's line of questioning. So you have purchased this farm, but you're not actively raising poultry at this time. There's another person who is raising poultry. Have they stopped doing that?
That's correct. So we purchased in August, and the last flock that went out was in October end, so about 1st of November.
And did you purchase this property for this biorefinery operation?
Purchased as a farm, to farm, and biorefinery is just a added
Okay.
value to it.
Any other points of clarification by the board? Mr. Turner, motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the county, the zoning administrator has met his initial burden of proof supporting his decision.
Second.
And, all right, we have a motion and a second. Do we need findings for that, sir?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Further discussion? Seeing none, all's in favor of the motion to uphold the county administrator's denial of the application, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye. So the application has been denied.
Mr.
As far
Chair,
as-
if I-
Go
if
ahead.
I can step in, the motion was just to find that the initial burden was met,
Right,
not to
okay.
uphold his determination.
Okay, thank you.
Correct, I agree.
Yep.
Now it shifts to their
To
case.
the applicants. I
Correct.
mean, Yes, you're now the applicant. Is that correct?
Alan, applicant, we'll take whatever title you'd like to apply.
Yeah, all right.
Do we need to vote again, or are we okay? Just with that clarification.
Oh, I think we're fine.
We're fine?
I believe you're fine. Everyone nodded in affirmance when Mr. Showalter made his clarification, for the record.
You have the floor.
Thank you very much. And I know you understand this, but just to be clear, that initial burden has been met. That doesn't mean you have to reach the same decision at the conclusion of our presentation. So they have an initial burden, then the burden of persuasion shifts to us. We're going to present witnesses, and I hope and believe that we will persuade you that even though they met the initial burden, that in fact, the use that is permitted and proposed, the use that is proposed on this site is permitted, we believe, by right, and even if not by right, it's permitted as an accessory use. And so with that, I'd like to call as my first witness, Mr. Cathuria. Head over there. Mr. Kathuria, can you state your full name for the record?
Rajneesh Kathuria,
And can you confirm that you were sworn or affirmed at the beginning of this hearing?
that's correct.
What's your address?
8665 Hickory Mill Road, Salisbury, Maryland.
And Mr. Kathuria, there are two entities that are parties to this appeal. One is Kathuria Farms. What is Kathuria Farms?
Kathuria Farm is the entity that purchased the farm and is a farmer's.
And when you say the farm, you're referring to 8665 Hickory Mill Road, the
That's
property
correct.
that's the subject of this
Yes,
application?
the subject property is called Rosewood Farm.
And Kathuria Farms purchased this property for the purpose of operating a poultry operation, correct?
That's correct.
Mr. Chair, this would be, if it's received without objection, Appellant's Exhibit C.
So I've given to you what has been marked as Exhibit C, which is a single sheet of paper identifying the address of the subject property, indicates it was purchased by Kathuria Farms August 8th, 2024, and has a series of photos. Can you just walk the board through what is depicted by the photographs on Exhibit C?
These photographs were taken by the Realtor, and it was part of the listing agreement or the listing that they had on Maris. And that's top two, and then the left is the three poultry houses. And then we have the poultry shed and the large decapitated building that used to be, I guess, a double-decker chicken house at some point.
And so when you say that, the two-story building, which is the rightmost image on the second line,
Correct.
that is a former two-story poultry house that existed when you purchased the property, correct?
Correct.
Does that building exist today?
No.
What happened to it?
So that is the building that I went in to ask permission to renovate, but I was asked to do a new, I guess, a new application, so that's what we did.
And you talked to the county about demolishing that poultry house?
That's correct.
And did they tell you a permit was required?
They told me permit is not required for that.
So you demolished that two-story poultry house after you purchased the property, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and if we look at the bottom left side, there's an aerial photo.
Mhm.
Which of the 5 buildings was the two-story poultry house?
That's number D,
D.
D as in David.
So the building that's oriented north-south, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And is that the location where the new building that is the subject of this discussion was constructed?
That's correct.
Okay. So is your testimony that when you purchased the property, it was improved by 2 single-story poultry houses, a older double-story, 2-story poultry house, the manure shed or poultry barn?
3 poultry houses.
I misspoke. 3 single-story poultry houses?
Correct. 3 poultry houses, a manure shed, and the barn.
Okay. And Mr. Kathuria, the footprints of those houses are provided here. I don't need you to read it all, but it's fair to say that they accurately summarize the dimensions of those existing buildings?
Correct.
And those buildings, actually, I don't have the total on this page. I think they total 40,400 square feet of poultry houses when you purchased the property.
Yes.
I now see a typo, actually. The last bullet at the bottom right side says portion of poultry house complex, rather than E, Is your testimony D? D is in David?
D as in David, correct.
That's the building that was demolished and replaced, correct?
That's correct.
And that building was replaced with two structures. The first is a 12 by 40-foot structure under building permit 31211,
Yes,
and the second is a 45 by 165-foot structure under building permit 31207, correct?
45 by 160, yes.
I'm sorry, 45 by 160, okay, thank you. Both of those new structures are more than 100 feet from the property line, correct?
That's correct.
I think one of your neighbors testified that he believed they were approximately 193 feet from the property line.
Probably if they done the numbers, they may be accurate.
So the aggregate size is slightly less than 43,000 square feet today, correct?
That's correct.
That's an increase of only, of less than 6% in footprint area, correct?
Yes.
Move for the admission of Exhibit C.
No objection.
Objection.
And that's as amended, replacing the E with the D?
We're replacing the E with the D, and actually on the second to last line, changing 45 by 165 to 45 by 160, based on.
That was D as in David, correct?
That's
E as in, E changed to D as in David.
Okay. Mr. Chair, is that received without objection?
Yes, was.
The next exhibit you have before you has been marked as Appellant's Exhibit D, as in David. Is it fair to state that this is just a copy of the State Department of Assessments and Taxation data sheet showing Cathuria Farms as the owner of this property, and then a copy of your title deed showing it was purchased in August of 2024?
That's correct. However, I'm kind of jealous that I paid so much money to this guy, based on the numbers that I see out here. Made a hefty profit.
E, and did you formally move D in?
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the admission of Exhibit D before we move on to the next.
Of E,
D as in David.
D as in David? I thought we did that.
He marked it, but that was distributed, but it was never formally moved. He's formally moving it now,
Okay.
and now E's the next, if you receive that, E's then the next one.
Got
Received
it.
without objection.
I got it.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Cathuria, Exhibit E, is it fair to say that this is a series of purchase tickets for poultry production from Rosewood Farm, from your property, which occurred in late October 2024, several months after you purchased the property?
That's correct.
And so there was active poultry production on the property when you purchased it,
That's correct.
and the most recent flock left several months after your purchase?
Correct. In October 28th.
I'm confused. This is D.
That is C.
C.
That's C.
This is C. Okay, now I'm straight. So is this F?
This, the deed is D as in David. This is E as in Edward.
You should have 3 so far.
C, D, and E.
Correct. And I believe you have to accept E still.
Yes, except,
So, Mr. Cathuria, since this last flock left, what have you been doing in the poultry houses?
So since the flock left, we wanted to put the contract on our name. And doing so, we were asked to do some repairs since they were older homes, older poultry houses. And that's what we've been doing is repairs.
And all of the repairs that have been requested for the new grower contract have been performed in most of the houses, is that correct?
That's correct.
And is there only one house that has some repairs remaining?
One house that had a water leak, so that's the only one that has some repairs remaining.
And when will those be completed?
Maybe by next week or so.
So let's talk now about international biorefineries. Is it fair to say that that's a technology company?
That's correct. It's a OEM, which is the equipment manufacturer.
I'm sorry, it is the OEM, it is an equipment manufacturer?
Correct.
And so, in this case, International Biorefineries is a technology provider for Cathuria Farms, correct?
That is correct.
And it's providing a technology that is admittedly innovative, some might say state-of-the-art, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
So I'd like you to take some time to walk us through what that technology is, but I think I'll have an exhibit in front of everybody to help you talk through the process, if that's okay. And this one marks appellate exhibit F.
thank you. Keep me straight.
That you've accepted this as F.
Thank you, sir. Except Exhibit F, appellant Exhibit F, material flow.
So, Mr. Cathuria, you've already heard a lot of testimony and argument tonight. This case, we believe, is a question of use, and we think it's been conflated and confused with a question of technology. And in this case, Cathuria Farms, has a property that has, as you testified, about 2 feet of litter existing in all of the houses that need to be cleaned out and handled or processed. And is going to have new flocks that will continue to produce poultry litter as they grow and develop, correct?
That's correct.
Cathuria Farms, as the poultry producer, needs to process its poultry litter just like every other poultry producer in Wicomico County, correct?
Yes.
And is it fair to say that in many cases, poultry litter is simply just stored before it's hauled off-site?
In most cases, it is.
And when it's hauled off-site, does it go to third parties?
The third parties are, in Maryland, there are farms that are not allowed to spread, so they have to drive them out of Maryland.
Or at least out of the region that
That's
has?
correct. Out of the
phosphorus
region,
litter?
mostly out of Maryland, that's what.
So
yeah.
there are poultry litter or manure aggregators or people who buy and transport poultry litter and sell it as a fertilizer to others, correct?
That's correct.
And Mr. Meadows made it clear that that's permitted as part of the production of poultry, correct?
Yes.
And so if you take 3 tons of poultry litter out of a house and you just put it in a shed, and then you put it in a truck and haul it away, will it weigh more or less the same? Will it have more or less the same volume when you haul it away?
No, it would not.
And why?
Our process,
Well,
because,
let me stop. Not your process. If it's just stored in a manure shed before it leaves the property,
yes, it still will be around 3 tons.
about 3 tons in the
Correct.
same volume.
Yes.
So now let's talk about what your process does and why it's beneficial.
So in our process, what we do is, if I want to just kind of go through the flow chart, that will make it easier for everybody to understand. So let's say 3 tons of poultry litter we dry that litter, and we have, once it's dried, the only thing that goes out is the vapors or the water that's coming out of the dryer. And once it's dried up to 10% of the litter usually is about 28% wet, 30%. So we dry it up to 10%, and then it goes into our thermal chambers, and it's instantly within a second it decomposes, and it then converts into vapors or fumes, and also the gas vapors, and also the solid piece becomes the biochar.
So poultry litter is dried, there's heat to dry the poultry litter.
That's correct.
And water vapor evaporates or leaves the litter, correct?
That's correct.
Then it goes into your technology. And in that technology, it goes into essentially a heated chamber, correct? It's entirely sealed.
Yes, without oxygen. So
And that
it's
chamber
not-
has no oxygen.
That's correct.
And so that's a difference from incineration, right? If it went into
Yes.
that chamber with oxygen, it would just burn.
It will just burn.
And what would be the byproducts if it just burned?
It will be all ash.
So it would go to ash, and then there would be emissions from that combustion, correct?
Correct, yes.
In this case, it goes into a heated chamber, and it's an entirely sealed system, correct? And
That is correct.
why is it sealed?
Because what we're doing is we're not actually directly burning the poultry litter. So it's not directly burned, so that's why it doesn't have that.
And so without the oxygen, without the combustion,
Right.
it gets converted into biochar and gas or vapors.
That's correct.
Those gases and vapors are collected in a sealed system, correct?
That's correct.
And then they're condensed. They go through something with a cooler temperature, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And they're condensed into what?
They're condensed into the fuel, the biofuel.
And so there's two products. There's
There's biofuel, and then we have a very small part left, which is syngas or synthetic gas, which we take that and we recirculate back into our heating process.
So on this property,
This is from Tracy.
with the scale that is provided, the bio-oil and the syngas are routed back to the dryer. They're burned on site to produce the heat for the process, correct?
That's right.
And now it's true that at some point, when this technology grows to be larger and to produce a commercial product to take and process other waste at a volume, it may very well produce bio-oil that is a marketable product as a renewable energy project, correct?
That's correct.
And do you agree that that would not be appropriate in the A1 district?
That's absolutely correct. For that, we need a much larger plant and much larger property, and it has to go on to the industrial area at that time.
And there would be trucking of litter that comes to that site,
That's correct.
and then there would be transport out
Right,
of a product that it produces.
that is correct.
Okay. In this case, though, when you burn the bio-oil and the syngas in the dryer to produce heat, will they fulfill 100% of the energy needs for this activity?
No, we will have to have additional heat or additional something else, which is propane to heat.
So there'll be some propane to get the process
In
started,
addition,
correct?
yes, in addition to the biofuel.
But largely, this process will fuel itself mostly from the bio-oil it produces. And let's talk about the biochar. What is biochar?
Biochar is a fertilizer and also a soil supplement.
And the volume of biochar that comes out of this process is approximately 1/3 of the poultry litter that goes into the process, correct?
That's correct, yes.
So in essence, a conventional poultry farmer can take 3 tons of litter out of a house, put it in a shed, keep it dry, and then put 3 tons of litter on a truck and haul it to another field or another county or another state. And they would apply it as a soil amendment, correct?
Correct.
What we're doing is taking 3 tons of litter, using the bio-oil it produces to heat other poultry litter, and reducing that down to 1 ton of biochar, correct?
That's correct.
More or less 1 ton of biochar.
Yeah, give or take.
So you're essentially reducing the volume of the poultry litter by 2/3.
That's correct.
And if that biochar leaves the site, just like any other poultry litter would be, is it fair to say that you would have 1/3 of the truck transport required to remove it from the site?
That's correct.
And is there any emission of gas or vapors from this process?
Any emission? No.
So-
At this time, there is very negligible if there is any.
And so the permit from MDE, you received a permit from MDE for this processing technology, correct?
That is correct.
What emission, what air quality considerations does that permit address?
They addressed as to that it is way below the threshold that that MDE has for air permits.
What process does the air permit apply to? It applies only to the combustion for the dryer, correct?
Well, to the dryer, yes, and to the entire process.
Okay, but the emission that's regulated is from the
That's
dryer?
right. Yes,
And that's just water and then whatever the combustion of the bio-oil and the propane? MDE has issued that permit for the air quality considerations, correct?
that is correct.
And so on this property, Mr. Cathuria, is it your testimony that Cathuria Farms LLC is producing, has produced and will continue to produce poultry,
That's correct.
and that it has on-site a large volume of poultry litter in the houses that will be available for this process,
Yes,
and that you are working to make some upgrades, but will resume flock operations in the houses and produce additional litter, correct?
that is correct.
And you've heard suggestions by others that there's lots of truck traffic now because you've purchased this property. Is there any, do you have any deliveries to or from this property for your farm operations or anything associated with processing of poultry waste today?
No, other than FedEx coming in once in a while, you know.
And when this operation occurs, is it your testimony that let me rephrase that. Will there be any additional truck traffic because of the technology you're using to process your litter?
If there is any, it would be maybe 1 truck a month.
And that would be to haul out?
That would be
the
to haul
biochar?
out the biochar that we produce enough, 1 ton a day. It will take us about a month or so to fill a truck.
But that would be about 1/3 of the trucking that would be required to remove the same volume of poultry litter that was not processed in this manner.
That is correct.
Is there any process water or any water discharged from this in any way?
No, absolutely not. We don't even use any water, so there's no usage of water, or there's no discharge.
Isn't there some, can I ask, isn't there some on the water up here?
So water, that's through our drying process that vapors, that go out. That's about it.
That's
Steam that comes off of it.
That's right. That's
Steam,
water vapor
correct.
that's in the
Yes.
poultry litter from their manure that's leaving the process. So there's no discharge from this operation.
That is correct.
And from an environmental perspective, do you have familiarity with composting and incineration?
Yes,
And if something is composted, does it have odors?
a lot of odor.
Will this process release odors?
This process does not release any odors.
And if it released odors, it would be releasing the gas and the vapors that you're trying to capture?
Just the steam or, whatever is coming out from the dryer. And we do have a provision that if, and MDE will be doing the testing on this, if there is anything going out, then we can put scrubbers on it.
And it's fair to say that this new technology is partially funded by grants, correct?
That is correct.
And this technology is embraced and supported by the Maryland Department of Agriculture, correct?
That's correct.
It's recognized as a new best management or best practice to deal with the volume of poultry litter that exists in this county and elsewhere.
That's correct.
And this project may very well result in a new application to this county or another jurisdiction for a commercial or industrial production in the future, correct?
Yes.
If there is not poultry litter produced on this site, will this refining technology operate? In other words, if you use all the litter you have and you're not producing new litter, will you operate this technology on this site? And you will not import any litter to?
We are, no. So the technology, the grant is allowing us to prove the technology for 1 year. So that's where we're at, that we need to prove the technology. And if what we claim, if our claims are as good as what we say it is, at that point, then we will go into much higher numbers.
But not
that
on
will
this
be
property.
not on this property. There will be, most likely 4 or 5 different locations on industrial area.
I don't have any further questions.
The industrial area where the growth would be?
That's correct.
And you're very knowledgeable. Where did you get all your knowledge on the operation? Do you have other operations in certain other areas?
So we have what we call a PDF or a small unit, which we did in lab. So we have the lab unit or PDU, that's what we call it.
Is that on this site or somewhere else?
Is sitting on this site, but it's not being used.